Anti-modding tutorial. Today we are going to be looking at the new-ish glTF support that Luanti has added as of, I believe, 5.12, 5.13. So we'll be kind of jumping back and forth between Blender, Luanti, and a little bit of code just to take a look at some things. So we will start with, I suppose, the essentials, which is getting the glTF file. Which in my case will actually be a GLB, but more on that later. So here we have, within Blender of course, our standard 1x1x1 cube. And that is essentially one node within Luanti. Entities have long had a thing. I don't know if I want to call it a thing, but they've long been a, you have to scale them by 10. I don't know how we exactly describe that. But you can do that with code with an entity, so it's not the hugest deal in the world. So I have two cubes now that are both the exact same size. We are going to go ahead and export this out as the glTF file. So you'll see I already have created a preset for Luanti. Let's go over what some of these changes are that we might need to be looking at. So this remember export setting option here, that is just for within this file. So if you are exporting the multiple elements from the same file, it'll always use the same settings, which is pretty handy. We have the include drop-down, is this a drop-down menu, whatever, heading? We're going to limit it to selected objects. So here, if I move this, I just have this one cube selected. That's all I'm trying to export. So we're going to do selected objects. If you don't have that checked, it'll export the entire scene, which is going to give you a lot of stuff you don't actually want. And yeah, no good. Transform plus Y up. This default is on. I just left it on. I don't know what would happen if we turned it off. If we go to the data section here, most of this is turned off. Mesh, you do want to make sure you have UVs and normals. UVs are important. That defines pretty much what texture is drawn on what face of your mesh. And then the normals basically just says which side of the face is facing outward. If it doesn't have normals, I believe Luanti will try to recalculate normals, but there's no guarantee that's going to be the correct direction for what you want. By default, these are the two that are selected, and I believe the rest apply modifiers might be turned on too by default, which would just apply any modifiers that your mesh had. Materials, we are going to change this to no export because GLB can in fact store the texture and I believe something else as well, but because Luanti won't read that texture, we're going to set that to no export. Otherwise, if there's a texture, it will export it, and it's just going to make the file larger than it needs to be because the data is not being used. So no export on that. Shape keys, we're not using those. I don't know if they're even supported yet. Armature, this is not animated, so we're not even going to look at that right now. We will later. Skinning, this relates to the armature, so we're not going to look at that. Lighting, it does not matter. But there's no option to turn it off, so I just left that at standard. Compression, I have not played with, but this theoretically, you can make the file smaller, technically taking on some degradation of your material, or I guess not your material because we're not doing material, but of the mesh. So I just left that turned off. It really doesn't make any difference. And then animation. There's no animation, so we're going to leave that turned off. I have the cube right here, so we're going to go ahead and export that out. And then I will just copy that over into the appropriate file. So we'll take a quick peek at the code going on here. So we have, this is very basic. There is a cube that's an OBJ file and a cube that is a GLB file. You'll see they're both exactly the same other than one's an OBJ and one's a GLB. And then when you punch them, they will spawn in an entity, one node above themselves, the OBJ spawning in the OBJ entity, the OBJ entity, and the GLB spawning in the GLB entity. And the entities are both the exact same, other than one obviously is the OBJ file, and one is the GLB file. I think you get the point. It's pretty simple. So we're going to go ahead and hop over on into Luanti here and take a look. First things we're going to notice is that's kind of weird. But here we go. So we have the OBJ mesh, and we punch that, and in spawns our obj entity. Just punch that, kill it, destroy it, make it go away, whatever. The GLB mesh, for some reason, is really tiny, but we punch it, and it goes the size we expect it to be. You know, both entities are the size of a full node, which is what is expected from our code, because, again, our entities, we do have visual size sets on these. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, meshes, when they're used as an entity, are scaled down to 1/10 size. And when they're used as a node, they are not scaled down. This kind of, I don't know if I want to say breaks convention, but is different than OBJs. I don't know why this is the specific way it was implemented, but in an OBJ, you have to set the visual size on the entity to 10 by 10. And that'll make it the same size as the node variant of the same mesh. For GLB, that is not the case. So if we want the entity to be the correct size, we can still use the visual size here to make it larger. But the node version, we don't get a visual size for. So if we're using the GLB mesh as a node and also as an entity, we do need to export the mesh for the node at a scale of 10. So let's just do that real quick. So we have this selected here. I'm going to go into edit mode, scale 10, out of edit mode, and then I'm going to go ahead and export this back out, write it over the GLB file here. I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop that over from its exported location to where Luanti is going to be reading it from. Go ahead and launch the world again, and you can see here the mesh is now the correct size, and we punch it. We took off the visual scale on the entity, so it is now also the correct size. Not the biggest deal in the world, only slightly annoying, because if you're trying to do things pixel perfect to an 16th grid, 16 pixel textures, when you scale up by 10, your grid goes from the 16 to 10. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5, and obviously 5 and 5, which is 10. Whereas if we zoom in here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then another 8, and then 8 and 8, 16, 16. I don't know if there is a setting you can change to set that. I don't believe so. You have subdivisions set here, but then you don't have another setting for the greater subdivisions. I don't know what scale means. Oh, I think that just fixed it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, well then, I guess you can fix it. You just have to set the scale here to 10. Well, sweet. I learned something in my own video. That's swell. So then you just have to remember that your entities are going to be the same size as the nodes in GLB, but not be 3D or OBJ. I don't know the reasoning for that. That's just how it works. On that note of the different files, or file formats, I suppose I should say, OBJs and GLB seem to be pretty much the same. So that previous cube that I exported, as an OBJ is 1.8 kilobytes, and as a GLB is 1.7. So potentially on a more complicated mesh, you may see some gains exporting as a GLB. All right, moving on to animation, what we've all been waiting for, because that's kind of the whole use case. Because if you're doing a static mesh, OBJ honestly works just fine. So here is my German Shepherd model from, I think it's like Farming Mobs or something it's called. I'm just reusing it because I didn't feel like making a new animation. So we can see here, obviously, there's animation. That's good. There are I think actually only one thing that you have to change to make this actually work. So we're going to go over to the output section here, and frame rate. Normally it's going to be default at whatever, 24, 25, 29, 97, 30. One of those 4, most likely. We're going to change it to custom. We're going to change FPS to 1 and base to 1. I don't really know what that does or why we do that. But if you don't, well, let's just say your animation will not work. I don't know why. It's the implementation. So just make sure you have these values set to this. I don't know what that means for any other glTF models that are already animated from elsewhere. If the animation is no good and you have to import it into Blender, that I guess is an exercise for you, because I always just create all my own stuff, so I don't know. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and export this out. Mostly stays the same, honestly. We're going to do selected objects. It is important to select your mesh and the armature. Otherwise, if you just select the mesh, not the armature, you will not get any animation. So make sure you have both selected. Transform, we can ignore the data. Shape keys can be turned off. We don't need shape keys. We're not using shape keys, it's just armatures. Skinning does need to be turned on because that pretty much defines how the mesh connects to the bone for deformation. Material, that'll be no export again because we're not exporting any of that. And then down in the animations tab, we do need to change animation mode. We need active actions merged, which I don't 100% know what that means, but it essentially takes your whole timeline of animation and makes it one animation. If you do the actions, they're exported as separate animations, which I don't think Luanti can read. So we just want to do the active actions merged. And then everything else pretty much can just stay the default settings that it is. I'm going to go ahead and export that out. And then I will take that file and move it over to where I need it to be. And we're going to go ahead and launch a different world. Only because this world has the things I need. Now, quickly, oh, that already finished loading. The GLB file is 64.7 for the dog here, whereas the B3D file is 126.5. So it's about half the size, which is good for the exact same thing. We'll notice here the animation is playing correctly. I think I have fly mode on. Yeah, animation's playing correctly, as one would expect. Everything here is going as it should. The walk animation honestly could use to be a little bit faster, but that is not the fault of anything particularly. Can I not? How do I do this? If I spawn one in, can't I punch it and have it attack me? I'm holding down. I don't want the dog to follow me. I want the dog to attack me, which, I mean, sounds crazy, but that's what I want. Well, there he is bobbing his head. I just kind of really wanted to see the attack animation, but I guess no such luck here. Well, anyway, we can see the animation is working as it should. I have a feeling these guys are following me. Oh, no, I picked it up. Okay, cool, swell. Not what I wanted. Anyway, animation is working there as one would expect. And the only change I had to make was obviously changing it from the .b3d extension to the GLB extension. Otherwise, everything stayed the same. The visual size, we're still multiplying by 10. I didn't change anything there. Collision box, nothing changed there. All of the animation stuff, that all stays the same. I'm using the same source blend file. I'm just exporting in a different format. So what this means is any files that you have exported as a B3D, assuming you have the source files, blend files, or whatever software you were using, you can just re-export them as the GLB. Theoretically, you're going to have a file size savings. I don't know if I can guarantee all the time, but at least in the limited experimenting I've done, it looks like you do get some file size saving. And this is just a far better format because it's readable by other software packages. In fact, I believe I can go ahead and import. Let's just go ahead and import this exact same thing. I guess I'll just leave everything as default in the import settings. I don't know. And let's see. Well, there we go. So the GLB imported. Everything looks perfectly normal. The armature looks a little odd. I'm not seeing like the actual bones, but that could just be how it's being displayed as icospheres instead of normal bones. But yeah, it looks like everything's there, which means, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, Oh, and it is all triangulated. But this would mean that if for whatever reason somebody did not have the blend file, but they wanted to make a change to a animated mesh, that they could import it and make whatever changes needed. I don't know why these faces are all split. That's probably something I did wrong on the import. In fact, actually, I believe there was a setting that said something about merging. Wasn't there? Well, maybe not. Oh yeah, right here, merge vertices. Yeah, I probably should have had that checked. What does this say? Requires discontinuous normals, UVs, and other vertex attributes to be stored as separate vertices as required by rendering and typographics hardware. Oh, okay. So then if we import that, theoretically, this will give us a... Okay, never mind. It doesn't seem to actually do that. Well, that's fine. My point being here more so that the file is now actually readable. So if for whatever reason we needed to change something on this mesh, we could. Or if we wanted to add more animations or tweak the animations, it's all there available just from what the mod itself is providing. You don't necessarily have to have the source blend file in order to get that. And all of the UV map is here as well. So if you were making a new texture and you couldn't quite figure out how something is mapped, this would let you see exactly how it's mapped. And of course, with re-exporting being a very real option, you could change things if you needed to or wanted to. I guess it doesn't even have to necessarily be a need. It could just be a, I feel like doing this, so I'm going to because I can. I do not know about backwards compatibility, so if you're using a version that supports the GLB and you're running it on a server and somebody connects with an older version of Luanti that does not support GLB, I don't know what happens, if it just renders nothing or if internally the file format doesn't even matter because it's being displayed somehow else. I don't know. That's a little beyond my technical level. But because this is free open source software, there's really no reason for anybody to be running old versions. So personally, I wouldn't even worry about that, because if somebody comes and says, hey, I can't see the meshes, what's going on? Well, upgrade. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free. Just go ahead and upgrade and get all the new features, and then you'll see the meshes. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on that. That should cover everything. I will have the export settings here that I have found to work best. I'll probably just take like a screenshot of these, and then I'll have them on my website, which will be linked down in the video description below, as always. And that way you can kind of just see how I'm at least doing it, and it'll give you at least a working baseline to go from. You can, of course, make tweaks to try and improve upon, or not improve upon, I suppose, if you so desired. But yeah, that's going to wrap this one up. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.